Now, my next guest is someone who has successfully harnessed the power of digital marketing to create a consumer education brand that complements his own financial planning business. Pete Matthew is the founder of Meaningful Money TV, an online resource that boasts hundreds of videos, podcasts, and e-learning assets dedicated to helping consumers understand the world of financial planning. Having now generated almost 5 million podcast downloads, this award-winning proposition all started with a simple idea and a single video. Welcome, Pete. Thanks for joining us here today. It's great to have you with us. For those people that are watching that perhaps not heard of you, can you just give a brief background as to your experience in this marketplace, please?
Yeah, sure, Stuart. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. My story is fairly normal, at least until the point that I started messing around on the internet, but I'm a 23-year veteran financial advisor, followed a fairly classic career path. So I was a tied advisor for the Co-op and the Royal & Sun Alliance back in the day, became an IFA in 2001. Shortly after that, just as I was settling nicely into that, my Cornish wife felt the call home. We'd settled in Cardiff where we both went to university, but by then my oldest daughter was born and the youngest was on the way. So we moved down to Penzance. Actually, we moved to Sennan, which is 1 mile from Land's End, so pretty much as far down as you can get. Was quite fortunate though, and found work with a practice down here. Essentially, I was it. Took over from a retiring guy. And then came to Jackson's Wealth Management in 2005 as a self-employed advisor, and then was fortunately able to buy in over time, mortgage to the hilt to do it, bought in. And since then I've been co-owning and co-managing this company, which is very long established in Penzance. I've been actually in town in some form since 1923. There's still a general insurance broker called Jackson's, which can trace its line directly from that. So, you know, in many ways, a classic path. I'm a financial planner. I'm a chartered financial planner, so I've sort of done a bunch of exams along the way, but I just love talking with clients and helping them fix their issues with financial services stuff, you know.
I want to come on to talking about meaningful money in more detail in a moment, if we may. But this idea all started with a book that you read, wasn't it, called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the germ of this idea all started?
Yeah, I'm a sort of unashamed nerd. I love technology, I love software, I love the internet, and messing around with boys' toys, really, big boys' toys. You know, technology really floats my boat. But yeah, really 3 things happened around the same time, which were the trigger for beginning this journey with meaningful money. So reading Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk was one of them. That's a book about his story, partly, but the central message is that whatever your message is, we now have the tools to get that out freely, without editing, and usually without hardly any cost. There's no gatekeepers anymore, thanks to the internet, and that's true more now even than it was back in 2008-9 when he wrote that book. And so I thought, I'll have a go, perhaps I'll get my message out. But the other 2 things that happened really was, firstly, I kind of had an itch I wanted to scratch. I suppose I wanted to help more people than I could ever hope to do one-on-one in a normal business setting. So I kind of just had an urge to do that, to make a bit of a dent in the universe, I think, rather than just do my job. It's just the way I'm wired, I guess. But then the second thing, or the third thing rather, was a lot of people in different arenas of my life told me that I was quite good at explaining things. And I just sort of heard that from several different people in several different places, quite close together, and it kind of went in. Oh, maybe I am good at explaining things, and perhaps I should put that to use. So those 3 things, this sort of desire to get the message of how to manage your finances out to the world, apparently people saw in me something which meant that I perhaps was able to do that. And this book and my general love of technology, those things kind of came together in 2009. And so I bought a little flip camera, which is actually, you can't quite see it, but it's up on one of the shelves behind me. A little thing about the size of a packet of cigarettes, 720 high definition camera. And I took it down to the prom very early one morning here in Penzance before I thought anybody would be around, because I didn't want anybody to see me, and just said, right, I'm going to talk about money and how it works. And that was the start, really. I officially went live with a dozen or so videos in April 2010, and now here we are 11 years later with hundreds of videos, hundreds of podcast episodes, and it's become a bit of a monster, but I'm still loving it to this day.
Pete, when you started Meaningful Money TV, did you have any idea how big this would become or how big it could become? What was the point at which you thought, wow, this is really turning into something?
Good question. I'd love to say there was any planning involved in it, but there really wasn't. It was entirely a whimsical, I thought I'll have a go at it, you know? Quickly found that I liked hamming it up in front of the camera, and my wife was very much on board, although I didn't originally tell her what I was doing because I thought she'd think I was an idiot. But as soon as she worked out what I was doing, she sort of got involved and had me doing all kinds of daft things over the years. But there was no intent with it. I think nowadays you would say I'm doing something called content marketing. I don't even know if that phrase was coined in 2009-10. I just wanted to combine my love of technology with a desire to sort of explain this stuff to people. I certainly never intended or even thought it was possible that I might make money out of it, that it might become a marketing thing. It's done two things for me over time. It's led to a constant stream of new inquiries, far more than we can cope with, but also it's now a business in its own right, which is kind of a separate thing. But the point at which I knew I was onto something was over 100 videos in and 18 months in, right? So it's not exactly an overnight success, but the point at which I knew I was onto something is I had an email out of the blue from a couple down in Bexhill-on-Sea, right? Long way from Penzance, as the crow flies, but they basically gave me their financial life story on email and told me how they'd narrowly avoided being ripped off. And at the bottom of their email was a single line. It just said, look, having watched several of your videos, we feel like we know you and trust you. Will you work with us? And I thought, well, it's a buy-in signal, right? And I sort of sat back in my chair and thought, wow, they feel like they know me and trust me. They have no idea who I am. I could be just a really good actor. But of course, you know, I'm not a good actor, I'm me, and that obviously came across, and they're still clients to this day. And that's what now, well, this summer it'll be 10 years they've been clients. And that was the very first trickle, which has now become a sort of raging torrent of new clients and new inquiries. And all of that was completely unintended. It's been a joyful accident from my point of view, really, but I'm very grateful for it.
So Pete, just to give the people watching some idea of how this all works, we're going to play a short excerpt from one of your videos now.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Meaningful Money. Today I've got another checklist top tips video for you, this time to help you review your finances each year to keep things on track. I'm telling you, this is so important. If you're new here, my name is Pete Matthew. I'm a chartered financial planner based in Cornwall in the UK, and I've been putting up content here on YouTube for more than 10 years, giving you everything you need to know and everything you need to do to secure your financial future. Reviewing your finances annually is so important. It prevents drift, where things get increasingly out of whack and then take an almighty effort to realign. Tiny course corrections throughout the year as needed, and then a bit of concerted time once a year should be all you need to do to keep your financial life in tip-top shape. And today I'm going to give you a checklist of everything you need to cover in your annual review.
So Pete, that's a short excerpt from one of your many videos, one of hundreds that you've got on your site. What do you think makes this format so engaging? Why does it work so well?
Good question. I've got a couple of formats. It's worth folks knowing that haven't come across me before is that after nearly 300 videos, right? You've got to like something to do 300 of them, right? After nearly 300 videos, I had begun to listen to podcasts myself, subscribed to a few, really got into that as a format. And I thought, you know what, that is actually a perfect format for what I'm doing because it enables me to go a little bit deeper. The beauty of podcast, of course, is that you can listen to it whatever you're doing. You can be doing something else like driving or mowing the lawn or walking the dog or whatever in the gym. And so I switched to podcasts in late 2012 and basically quit videos altogether for quite a few years. Latterly, the last 2 years, I've done both, okay? And I'm continually trying to sort of refine what it is we're doing. So there's two different markets, really. For the podcast, you can go a lot deeper, be very detailed. I tend to now work in a seasons-based approach. So I will say, right, what am I going to really talk about? I'm going to do a season on it. And that might be 10 weeks of half an hour episodes. So that's a lot of content. You can really go deep into a subject in that amount of time. YouTube needs to be shorter than that. There is a trend towards slightly longer videos, but they need to be extremely well produced, very engaging, almost mini movies. If you're going to be doing sort of training, teaching type videos, they need to be fairly snappy, reasonably bite-sized. Of course, what video gives you is the ability to put graphics on screen. They can definitely see the person, so body language and the little sort of smirks that you might put on your face and the smile and stuff. People warm to that. So I think each format, written blogs is another one, which is extremely powerful. Different people relate to different formats and want to consume information in different ways. So I think, to answer your question, what makes particularly the video format very powerful is that it's pretty short and snappy. You can explain things really well. You can eyeball people, or they feel like you're eyeballing you if you're looking directly into the camera. And there's you can project a lot of trust in that. People can sort of see the cut of your jib and sort of look at the whites of your eyes and think, actually, this guy looks all right. This girl looks all right. So I think video is arguably the most powerful of them all, or the most universally powerful of them all. But podcasting for me is, as it happens, been the runaway success.
I want to pick up on this theme of trust. And I want to play in now a short clip from a presentation that we had done for us by Martin Bamford late last year, another chartered financial planner. He was talking to us about the topic of building trust in financial services. Here's what he had to say about trust.
So I'd like to start by explaining the problem. And there really is a problem when it comes to this. And the problem is that consumers don't trust you. And they don't trust me either. And the reason they don't trust you is because they don't really understand you. Now, I think it's fair to say that the clients you already work with, they trust you because they've tasted your cooking. They know what you stand for. They know about the service ethic that you bring to the party. They know who you are and what you're all about. So they trust you. But everyone else, that's where this problem arises. Now, the reason other people don't really trust you is because they are constantly bombarded with negative headlines. Perhaps not so much recently. I think we're seeing a lot more headlines about coronavirus and lockdown and things like that. So we are getting a brief respite from the negative financial services related headlines, but they're a constant. When people read in the paper about PPI mis-selling, they immediately think that applies to you and me. And when they read about the British Steel pension scheme mis-selling, they immediately think that applies to you and me. And when they think about and read about Neil Woodford and Woodford Investment Management, of course, that's all our fault. So they see these very negative headlines, and that's the image that's built up of the financial advice community straight away. The reason that the newspapers and the press share negativity like this is, well, the old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. Negative stories and sensationalist stories are what sells papers because they capture attention, they generate clicks and eyeballs in this case, and people do like to read about them, but they give a very unfair representation of what we're all about in the retail financial services profession.
So Pete, that was quite a tough thing to listen to there, a bit of tough love from Martin really, when he tells us that consumers don't trust us. But it does chime with research that's been carried out by the FCA recently in their Financial Lives survey that shows 42% of adults don't trust financial services, and only 1 in 3 believe that financial firms are open and honest and transparent. The only silver lining really is that those figures are slightly higher than the previous survey. But what's your take on this issue of trust?
Martin is bang on, as ever. He's a very smart guy and understands this stuff. And it's absolutely right. We forget, because we tend to spend most of our time in front of people who are already over the threshold. They're already in our offices. Usually if they've got that far, they've maybe been referred to us. So that's already warmed them up a little bit. They will certainly have checked our website, and hopefully checked our registration and things like that. And maybe that's just sort of salved some of their fears. But we forget just what a massive amount of trust it takes for people to walk into our offices, pick up the phone and start talking to us about their money, for crying out loud. I think we'd rather talk about pretty much anything else to a stranger than money. And Martin alluded to headlines. You know, it is a constant. Negative press, we get tarred with that same brush. The beauty of the internet, social media, YouTube, podcasts, all that sort of stuff is that there is now nobody preventing us from getting our own message out and fighting like with like, essentially. So, you know, part of my job is to present a trustworthy face of the personal finance world. And there's some fantastic people doing that as well as me, lots now and more and more. And I think we need ever more and different kind of voices just presenting an alternative to the relentlessly negative press. And you know, people can smell a rat a mile off. And we really are, I mean, we are evolutionarily wired to get an immediate sense of whether we like somebody, whether we trust them or not. And fortunately, we have tools at our disposal now that we can use to get a buy-in to the second round at the very least, you know. So people have already seen us. They've already heard us, maybe in a podcast, or read what we've written. They've got a sense about who we are, because it's important to be sort of personal in this stuff. So my listeners know that I've got two girls. They've both been on the videos and the podcast in the past. So that sort of stuff, you know, is important. They know that I like the band Rush. You know, that sort of personal element. This is how we overcome trust. This is how we get to know people. And so it's an incredible time to be alive, because we can now fight that negativity before people get in touch. And that, I think, is a crucial factor. We can give ourselves an advantage by creating trust in the eyes of our prospective clients before they even pick up the phone or walk in the door. And that's definitely what I've seen, Stuart, which surprised me in many ways. But I never have to convince anybody of anything now when they get in touch with me. They're already saying, look, we know what you think. We know that we like the way you are saying financial services, financial planning should be done. Where do we sign? So that's powerful, right?
Pete, I just want to pick up on the complexity of what you do. Looking at your set there in the background, very impressive. You've clearly spent a lot of money on developing that. If advisors want to get started doing this kind of thing and following in your footsteps, so to speak, is this something they need to spend a lot of money on? Are there software and apps that you would recommend that people look towards to get themselves started on this?
You've already got everything you need to do this in your pocket, right? Mobile phone. So these days, the things that we carry around in our pockets are capable of 4K high definition video, really good audio. We can create and edit video in really simple apps, usually first party, the apps that come with the phone. We can do all that with the computer in the palm of our hands. You don't have to buy anything new. And I mean, that wasn't possible, right? In 2009, the iPhone was only in its probably second iteration by then. I didn't have one. I was still on a BlackBerry, I think, and you wouldn't have been able to do it with that. So the technology's caught up in many ways, so you certainly don't need the kit that I've got, which I've built up over a very long time, by the way. So you can get started dead easily. It's really not about the technology, it's more about the content, the stuff that you're saying. Yes, you know, it needs to be listened to-able. So if it sounds like you're talking in a public toilet because of dreadful echo and all that sort of stuff, then that's going to be a bit of a turn off to people. If it's wobbly video and not really watchable, that will be a turn off. But it's easy to get that stuff right. You just prop your phone up on your sort of kitchen worktop and sit on a breakfast bar stool and talk to it. And you just iterate. You get slightly better each time. I've helped a few people do this over the years. Get slightly better. Look at what you think you can improve from the last one and continually iterate. And eventually, after 500 or so videos, you end up with a kit that looks like this, which is completely unnecessary, but a lot of fun for me. But really, it's about the content and the consistency, definitely, rather than just the tools that you use.
I'd like to move on now to talk about ways in which you've branched out into other channels, not just videos, and you've mentioned podcasts already. And at this point, I'd like to play in another clip from the Martin Bamford presentation that I mentioned just a moment ago.
So how do you go about getting your voice heard in this incredibly noisy world, this incredibly busy world? To give you some sort of numbers by way of illustration on this, every single minute 300 hours worth of new video content is uploaded to YouTube. Every single minute, 350,000 tweets are published on Twitter, and not all of them from Donald Trump. Every second, 40,000 searches are performed on Google. So it's an incredibly busy and incredibly noisy market out there, and it's getting busier and noisier all the time.
And Martin was talking there about the noise of marketing. It is a crowded, noisy landscape out there. How important is it for advisors to have different channels to reach out to their customers and their prospects?
That's a big question with lots of answers potentially. So yes, it's a noisy world, but you don't need to reach the entire world. Okay, it depends what your purposes are for doing this. For most of us, it will be, at least in part, to get some more clients, right? As a marketing thing, nothing wrong with that. But you don't have to cast the net very wide. I now have clients, obviously, all around the country, but maybe you just want to reach your local area. My good friend Amir Rocha-Lima, who's a chartered financial planner in Kingston upon Thames, I think. He has a podcast for Kingston. So he interviews people around his local area, business owners and things like that. So very, very niche, right? And he's never going to have millions of downloads, but it doesn't matter because he's very focused. Even if it's your intention just to have some fun with this, that's a perfectly valid motivation, by the way. That was certainly mine. Just having a presence on some of these sites, even if it's just your own website, right? Rather than just another bland, boring financial advisor, mortgage advisor website, just having something of yourself on it, explaining this stuff before people come into you is super powerful. I sometimes get asked, well, if I sort of give all the sugar away, what are people, going to pay us for? But of course, we need to get over the fact that we have some kind of secret knowledge, like the Illuminati or something, and people have to pay us to get access to that. That's garbage, because by giving them the knowledge, actually they're far more likely to trust you and actually say, yeah, actually what you do is complicated, it's important, it's obviously very skilled, we'll pay you to do it rather than try and navigate this minefield ourselves. So I have various different channels, most of which I'm blessed to say have sort of fallen into my lap, really. So I was approached to write a book by Harriman House. That was a bit of a life ambition, something I've always wanted to do, so I did that. Basically just codified the endless hours of script and the podcast into a sort of 55,000 word book, and that's gone very well. That's definitely sent more clients my way. I now have an academy, which is a website of paid courses. So there's essentially 3 phases to that. So depending on what financial life stage people are at, they can pay me some money, get access to courses and some financial planning software through that. And that's sort of a middle tier, if you like, with the free tier at the bottom, the paid tier, but one-to-many tier in the middle in Meaningful Academy. And of course, the top of the pyramid, if you like, is working with me one-on-one, and that's the most expensive. And they all kind of lead people to that point, and it becomes a marketing funnel, if you like. They come across me because of the podcast. Maybe they join the academy, and they're making some big financial decisions, and so they decide to engage me as a financial planner to deal with their situation specifically. I have to say, Stuart, I've sort of found all this stuff out by accident, right? By doing. I've just stuck at it and tried different things. Some things have worked, some things haven't. But just getting out there and having a presence online is going to be increasingly important. Without it, you're just going to be invisible, and certainly there's no way of differentiating yourself from the next person, the next advisor down the road from you.
And Pete, just thinking about what you said earlier about that couple from Bexhill who watched one of your videos and reached out to you, it must feel like sometimes people know you even before they've met you through watching your videos. Is there an art to telling a good story, or can anyone do it?
I reckon any advisor who's done any length of time in the industry will never run out of stuff to say, because if you're dealing with clients every day, you're getting asked the same sort of questions all the time, right? And so that's the place to start, really. Whenever people have said, come to me, and I've sort of coached a couple of people through this, they said, well, where on earth do I start? How am I going to work out what to talk about, what to write about? And I'll always say, right, you need to go away and write down 50 headlines, 50 subject lines. Those could be questions that you get asked by clients, stuff that just pops in your mind that you think you might need to talk about. The sort of repeated phrases that we use all the time that keep coming up, the sort of stuff we develop over time as advisors to explain a given concept. All those things can be a blog post, can be a YouTube video or whatever. Is there an art to storytelling? I think that a decent advisor's already got that skill. It's certainly not a black art. If you can sit in front of a stranger and ask them to trust you, and if you can do a good job for them, if you can answer their questions, if you can allay their fears, you can easily do what I've done. It might take practice. It certainly did for me. I listened back to my first podcast episode and wince a little bit. The early videos were very shaky. The audio was terrible. And I was very halting. And so it's a skill, right? Like anything, you practice and you develop. But if you're an advisor, you're already a storyteller and you're already really good at engendering trust in people. So just milk that and apply it to this slightly different format. It can be a little bit different because you're not getting the immediate feedback, but you will get feedback over time. And it's just a case of putting the skills you've already got to work in a slightly different medium.
Pete, Meaningful Money has developed into this hugely successful online brand, but you're also running your own busy financial planning practice. How do you find time to do both?
Yeah, now, sort of 10, 11 years on, I do a day a week on Meaningful Money because it is so beneficial to Jackson's Wealth Management, my financial planning practice. My colleagues and I'm one of 4 owners of this business. So, I can't just sort of unilaterally make decisions, but my colleagues encourage me to take a day a week to write, record, do all the stuff I need to do with Meaningful Money. But I don't watch TV very often. It's been an awful lot of evenings and weekends, but I don't ever accept the excuse from people that they don't have time. If you say you don't have time to do something, what you're actually saying is that it's not a priority for you. And that's fine. If you'd rather play golf, then play golf and enjoy it and be intentional about that. If you're going to do something like what I've done, it's got to become fairly all-consuming, not to the detriment of your health or your family, obviously, but it's got to certainly become a big part of life because you've got to be consistent. I sometimes think if I was starting again now, it wouldn't take me so long, I would hope, to get where I am, only because I've learned a lot of lessons on the way. And if I could start again knowing those lessons, I'd have a head start. But it does take time. If I've achieved any modicum of success, it's sort of 11 years of overnight success, really. And again, as I've said sort of several times, I'm still surprised and astonished by a lot of the things that have happened to me. But it really has just been by having a go and keeping going. And it's become this beast of a thing, which is a successful business in its own right. It takes a lot of keeping on top of. I've got people helping me now. I'm no longer editing my own videos. I'm writing the scripts, I'm recording. I do know how to work all this equipment, but I do have help now, mercifully. But that's come over time. But I didn't for the first 7 years. I did it all myself. So you've got to want to do it, and you've got to give it the time. You've got to prioritize it. But I love setting the cameras up. I love talking to the microphone every week. So it's a hobby. It's my thing, and that makes it easy to keep up with.
What would be your tips and hints, do's and don'ts, if you like, to any advisors that are looking to get started with their own digital marketing program? Where should they start?
That's a great question. Easily the number one tip is to be really mindful of the questions that clients ask you. Right? If you're in front of clients all the time, you will be hearing the same things from them over and over again. Different clients, same question. Write those things down and find ways to answer them that can be shared online, whether that's a blog post on your company website or on Medium or on your Facebook page or whatever. Just find a way of sharing that, right? Don't be overwhelmed by all the possibilities. Just find something that works for you and have a go. One way to sort of find what works for you is to think about what you're consuming personally. So as I said earlier, I started listening to podcasts in 2011, 2012. loved the medium, and that's why I thought I will make that sort of pivot and become a podcaster myself. Maybe you love reading medium, maybe you love YouTube, and you think, well, okay, I'm going to have a go at doing that and use whatever floats your particular boat, maybe have a go at creating content for that format. But it's a lot easier than you think at outset. So be mindful of the questions that people are asking and you are answering all the time, and just be mindful of what you personally enjoy and speak to that format, and give it a go and see what happens. You'd be amazed at what happens, actually. Be consistent, definitely. Continue to learn to improve. Consume other content creators that you like. I'm continually watching YouTube and learning stuff. That's why my backdrop looks like this. That's why I've got the camera and the desk that I've got, because I've seen these things in YouTube videos that I've enjoyed. So consume first, and then create your own stuff based around the things that you're hearing from clients all the time. And you'll be amazed at what might be possible, because people will, if it's good, people will consume that stuff, and they'll consume it before they come to meet you, and it'll really help you in those first meetings.